Sangye che danso pi chonam la chanchu pardo dani kyapsun che bhage jinso ge pe chonam ge dola penjire sangye ndo parasho sangye che danso pi chonam chanchu pardo dani kyapsun che bhage jinso ge pe chonam ge Rola penchire sangye ndo parasho sangye che danso ki chonam chanchu pardo dani kyapsun che lake shinso ki pe chonam Rola penchire sangye ndo parasho simchen tamche dewa devi gyutang dembara kyuchi simchen tamche lungal ge gyutang tawara kyuchi simchen tamche Lunga mebe dewa tam mindra barakuchi simjendam nyerin chadan nidan ta tanyamla ne barakuchi simjendam che dewa ewe gyudan dem barakuchi simjendam che lunga ki gyudan tawa simjendam che lunga mebe dewa tam mindra simjendam che nyerin chadan nidan ta Nyamla ne para gyuruji simchen tamche dewa devi gyutang dembara gyuji simchen tam tungal dang tungal gi gyutang tawara simchen tamche tungal mebe dewa tam mimrawa simchen tamche nyirin chadang nidang ta nyamla ne para gyuruji simchen tamche dewa tam devi gyutang dembara Simchen damje long dang long ji gyu dang tawar. Simchen damje long mebe dewa dang min dawa. Simchen damje nyerin chadang ni dang da. Panyam la ne para gyu ji. Sajbe oe ji. Chu ji me do dang. Re ro Sangye Jindu Medembu Aye Dokuenanda Jinlai Cheparashu Yedam Guru Renamendala Kani Adayami.
Until enlightenment, I go for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the accumulation of the practices of giving and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. Until enlightenment, I go for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the accumulation of the practices of giving and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. Until enlightenment, I go for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the accumulation of the practices of giving and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. May all sentient beings be endowed with happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from joyful bliss. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free of bias, attachment, and anger. May all sentient beings be endowed with happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from joyful bliss. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free of bias, attachment, and anger. May all sentient beings be endowed with happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be freed from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from joyful bliss. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free of bias, attachment, and anger. This ground, spread with incense, adorned with strewn flowers, Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun, and the moon, I imagine as a Buddha land, and by offering it to you, may all living beings enjoy this pure land. Thus, meeting the teaching of the peerless teacher is due to the spiritual mentor's kindness. I dedicate this virtue for all living beings to be cared for by excellent spiritual friends. Idam Guru Ratnam Mandalakam Niryataya.
Nge tuje nge zungwa tawa tamche pampe chini tunze be kodam te la cha za lo. Ya ta. Chunju sharab gilyu zade. Ta ngone nampel tawa thara ke kebar de ta tini yondi gala. Ta nga zog ngone chana pake kars kore. Nampe tupta. Ani jiye pe nane ta chwe tamche zembar tuba ke lengen ji dang ke milengi ji nisu kazun che ne. Ta tingi pala tsoba tsoya pa nuling che ji tega lep yores roa. Ti indi gala nuling che de yondi gala ta sensamba menche la ani zembar tuba ke lengi gore. Yani ta umapa zembar tuba ke lengi mare. Tenane uma tangiwa zidi chwe tamche 배 민경 따였음지 최담제 넘버투바 vil점이야 케밀링이지 된지 차용도 가라 따와트라게 개발돼 쉬우지 내 전부 차디어래 양 두다오마트 따와트 노르즈를 까자셔야 요 말에 따와트라레스
So now here, at this point in the text, in the 9th chapter on wisdom in the way of the Bodhisattva, for us actually as Buddhists is really a very, very important subject, very important points to be discussing. These 4 philosophical tenet systems of the Vaibhashika, Sautantrika, Chittamatra, and Madhyamaka. And really the dividing point between these 4 comes down to whether they posit any truly substantial existence, true existence in phenomena or not. And so for us now, it's very, very important here to discuss their points of debates. What is positive, what is refuted in these different philosophical views. And so from the Chittamatra or mind-only school down to the Vaibhashikas, they actually do posit there to be some true existence in phenomena. However, the Madhyamaka school or the middle way school don't at all posit any true existence in phenomena, but rather their philosophy is that there's not even an atom's worth of true existence in phenomena, but that it rather exists by means of convention, meaning that there are imputed names, concepts, and labels and so forth that are imposed on these phenomena. And so it's not to say that these mind-only down to the Vaibhashikas, their philosophies of worldview are wrong, are completely wrong and to be discounted, but rather it is just that they are not as refined as the higher view of Madhyamaka. And so really the difference that, so it's very important that we understand the difference here really is the refinement in the understanding of the mode of reality.
다 하게 따위 개발글라 Kruwe Zawa Chingingi Maribalayang Tara Lepson, Tara Yore.
La.
Mariba, Kruwe Zawa Chingingi Maribalan Tara Yore. Tesu, she was a Mississippi Ketchmuchad Yore, Esrwa.
And so we see that actually there is the differentiation between these four philosophical tenet systems comes down to the refinement of the view and the points that are asserted. And so their views differ. For this reason, their views differ. And as well with this overarching differences in the view, there are differences in the way that the fundamental ignorance or lack of knowing, this fundamental ignorance also has different points of refinement between the different philosophical schools. And these also are important for us to know about.
민경 다여점 최탐제 때는 좀 되긴지 kelengin umap tangyuwa minzam lazam jamado 최탐제 zambartuba zulsame kemeling umap tawade bangone 타셔된 차디어라 아니 삼루탄에 마도 다수지 하고야 요 말에 레라버지 또트비야 요 말에 이 남주 연대긴지라 이 삼루탄바이나 이 토니 다 오늘 치 인산 천리바이나 데톨라 다 시라게 남주들네 삼당긴두스 땡중세야더라 빼고긴두스 숭두스데 여름 숭도 천리바게 천리바게 아니 빼 땡중생인데 다 세리나라 창가견에 레변 레스 맞을 걸레 맞잖아 이때 단다 천리나라 땡중 데라 니페 굽자질 때요레스 굽자오
굽자나
제르
오레레
뭐 그런 거사다 마소나 시치 토비어레스 시오레스 그 남주단에 삼당이나 때니 중앙에 삼당이나 수도 브라마 뭐도바지 다 디니 또 두고 와 어디 디니 인데가라 말한주 근데 수도 라왕고 덴바와지 유능원이 여바진 진용데가라 대왕게 차당 기거래 때는 중시야들라 꼬야부질라네 딘다웨 수도 라왕 쪽에 짐바다 캐두고 다데 인도가라데 수도 라왕 두번 짐바데 그로에 자와제데 맞죠 벤진데 그로에 자와레즈나 남베 다 숨고래 송하나진지 되게 맞아 삼당나 라트야 요래 띵원에 내 민포 삼당 거래스
So much of the points of the different views come down to differentiating and defining what is and what isn't. And what is being denied here in the higher views is that phenomena, outer objects, possess any true intrinsic natural existence. And what is being posited is that they exist by means of what we call them, what we name them, what we label them, what concepts we have attributed to them. And that actually they are not, there's no true existence in these objects themselves at all. Just as briefly mentioned, not even an atom's worth of true existence really exists. They are just, if we look very closely, we will see they are labeled, imputed phenomena. And actually, we really need to put into play some intellectual scrutiny and really think about this, if it's really going to make sense at that deep level, that they, again, this is the very most refined level of understanding of the mode of our reality. And so we must put forth the intellectual effort and really think about this if it's going to make sense to us. And so even the outer scientists, so the ordinary person can examine and scrutinize this, and actually material science, the scientific schools that are concerned with the observation of matter and so forth have also come to the conclusion of the interdependent relationship of phenomena coming into being and existing in an interdependent way. So this, they think very much about this relativity of things. And His Holiness the Dalai Lama is often saying this, that science is now coming to the same conclusion of the theory of relativity between objects and interdependent origination, that things are not what they at first glance look like. But what do they, for the untrained or to the mind and eye that doesn't examine further into what appears to it? It looks very real. It looks actually existing. And because it looks so real, we then generate feelings of attraction and repulsion. So attachment and aversion to these things, a liking or a not liking to these looking as if they are truly existing things. But actually what we should know is these things are not what they appear to be. And we go back to that view of interdependence, a relative existence. When we understand that these things are not what they look like, these objects that we cast a liking to are not what they appear, and therefore they look like they have a fixed independence, that they are just what they seem to be. And it's for this reason that we become attracted, attached to them, and create a relationship with them that causes all of the suffering that we experience in samsara. And so, but at closer inspection, we again see that they are not in and of themselves independent from their own side, authentically, actually existing things. And if you really put forth the examination, that's exactly the place also that you will, and the conclusion that you will come to.
차단 가능시기는 더 차이겠는다. 공부 깨난다. 차단 깨용도 갈라. 율도 태용도 갈라. 코랑원이 연대 버지도 수톱도 여건지 가서 삼로 걸고도 왔대. 이 가르잖아. 텔라 렌징이 레 요바다 깨지게 담바. 코랑 율원이 여건지 때 다스도 수톱버지 맞아 징이도 와. 차바케네 차바케지 율데페 수도도 열레게 빼 이도 온와지 뭐니잖아 여마와 맞을 파 따샤르마도 코에네 로 말한도 삼르 로그 파 따샤르마도 그런 거는 좀 되긴지 여마로 민도와 삼로군에 다나 라토고도와 어때 인도가라 덴진 세야데 멤버들이 덴진데 랭케당 군다니요래 두때 쪼타 샤게데
렌케당 콘탁.
군다
콘탁.
에 두때 쪼타 샤게데 군다래 두때 왕기 중도겨
라 디 콘탁.
두타 두때 왕기 중 두때 로다테도 군다 차리요래 렌진 군다 배난 너네 비귤라 셈버즈베 렌진 군다 여러와 신장 비귤라 여러와 땡큐 일타나 젤리온드가 당 자다리다 덴데마임바 투다마임바 자다리다 심전탐 제가 맘맘 슈슈기 렘버징이야지도 텔레 링케시 거래
양케 랭케기
링케시도가라 심전탐 제기 귤라 자다리다 빼 탕에 미시긴이나 대주귤라 렌진 여레스
덴진.
덴진 데버즈메 덴진이 마주 귤라 군타지단 링케지 니 용거래 제단 링케데 딱 그러게 잡아지기 거래 자단께 깬데 링케되기 지기 거래
라.
자단께 깬 얼마데 렌진 링케되기 지기 거래 렌진 링케들라 너야데 다 동이 마토나 이 너야 탑시 전다 균이요 말해 제단 동이 라페 삼다나 땡땡들 삼당과데 집은 내 전부 때 자두되어래 간지 맞아 차단기 구고 걔그 누구 말해 룽알 가서 누구 말해 룽알 만드나 룽알 디 규데 머리 바래 다 룽알 기규 뇽몽 기규 머리 바 루세드 투용드가라 머리 바데 다 렌진 링키디 다 제퍼체고야데 시부네 주무차디오레 지치단 렌진데 아니 다 마제 버도 맞아 뇽몽제 균이요 말이 뇽몽 마제는 둥아제요 말이 된두가다 시작 개 주무차기도 왔지 다 수소에는 서로알라 두시네 란라이 뇽초르데서 삼당네 애니 두스제이나 제바제이나 데니 셈라 펜도체 용거래 융니 셰샤가 잠마임바 융니 셰바데 수수가라다 뇽초르라 빠네 삼당 거래
숑네 셰바스나
융니 숭여와 뎀 동니데 렌징기 님포레즈도 숭여와 셰데여데 대잠지 가서 뵌거 말 가서 뇽초르레 잘 두기나 더 차이케두가나 간데시 율데 간데지 난게도 제단 콘루케두가라 콘루 케세 율데 추투바지 난게도 미도 도서 삼다야 추투바지 난게였나 다 뛴다왜 추투바데 여데메 아니 양양도 따지 땅과 와다 추투바데 라인에 버기니 유 난가나진지 미도 선데 삼로 코리나 때는 중샤마도 고랑원이 배 투투지 균민도 렘버 맞아 아테킨 짐바ski 거래 아테킨 짐바께 나진지기 덴디지다 민두서 삼로 거리나
아타키 짐바 아테스나
아테 시디가라 대다 벽에 유응원에 렘버가진도 우선데 슈추무시키기도 어때는 짐바도 균이 시투고 다 인규 때때리 때는 중화들라 과야보 때는 중화 과야보지다나 된다왜 유응원이 아테긴 짐바데 파질 까투고 아래 야자갸담바 대가이나 자당 끼야데 슈충로 그래 인규 원했잖아 따띠 까야 탑실로 와 가지 엔드에날 퍼진 채널 디어레 수이 디징이 또나 텔 상긴 지든 중 코바트베 인즈 숭거레
라
수이 디징이 또나 텔 상긴 지든 중 코바트베 인즈 숭레 테 가르신 거레 상긴 지든 키워 과야데 머리 바까야 돈 따라와 semchen gyula mari pade ke eni 디징이 또 이나 마리바케 누구라 마리바케나 룽알 셀도 부러와 시부지 거기 전부 도와 수위 디징이 또나 텔라 상긴 지든 주베 꼬바트베 인들 숨겨래 어떻게 배 내체모래 맞아 삼로배 양내양도 땅 거래 레라보지다 말했대 삼로 님보다는 삼로 kurgyore 아니 그상 아마테 저견도 돼서 벤치 살포도 가지 켄라케 바 테마시 텔라케베런지 여만인 헬라라레 가인 똥버지 대신 똥이시나 빠여 인저 중도 빠여바데 똥이시나 빠여바 자거래 밤에도 가르치고래 녀몽 지겨라 녀몽은 다치 수분빈장 배 버룰람배 건중먼주 제당 아니 배 구마게야 짜바게야 미 군저도 못음이 잡아줘야돼 녀몽이 용구도 저선 동인시나 빠여 인세야다 배 구주도 왔대 좀 삼당 거래 양내용도
Diane, I found the entry for ate, if you were wondering.
Yes, if you, I mean, I get the gist, but if you have an exact, certainly.
Solidified, clinging, grasping, stubbornness, obstinacy.
Solidified clinging. Okay, that's good. Thank you. And I'm just going to see if I have a quote nearby too. So let's look at how this plays out for us, how we can look within our own experience to understand how we view our reality and react to reality and the different possibilities there. So if we think about it, for example, when we have hatred or anger towards someone, or it also could be like deep, like attraction, like lust, like an obsession, or an obsessed attraction, deep attraction. When we regard that object of our hatred or our attraction, it's something that either really angers and is unpleasant for us or really pleases us because we are attributing to it some realness. We actually have a fixed notion of it as being something that is very real. And this is because karmically we have this karmic clinging to a substantial reality. This is just something that comes quite naturally, almost instinctively in our karma. And so when we meet with something, let's say, someone that we consider an enemy, we have in the back of our head this fixed notion of this real person who doesn't like us or we don't like, or a real person that we have great passion and craving for, but we have a fixed notion of them as real and substantial and actual. But actually, this is nothing but mind's creation. This is a projection of one's mind. There is no real true enemy. There is no real true lover. If we look closer, we will see that. So we've spoken about this clinging to a substantial reality, clinging to reality. And there is both the imputed clinging to a reality and then the intrinsic clinging to a reality. So this is the first one that we mentioned that is kind of like comes along with our karma. It's deeply embedded within our karma. This clinging to a reality. And so actually within the different tenet systems, they also speak about this, but they speak about the imputed fixation to reality. So that which we impute upon phenomena and so forth. And actually these forms of clinging to true and substantial reality are embedded within all sentient beings. And actually this is the root of samsara. This is the very root of samsara. And so what do we do to uproot this deeply embedded fixation to the notion of a real reality, a real truly existing reality out there? Actually, the way to do this is to examine and come to realize emptiness. And without realizing emptiness, there is no other method to uproot this clinging to a deeply embedded clinging to a reality, a true reality in things. Both the realization of emptiness, or we could say the understanding of interdependence. It all comes down to that. And actually, none of us really like the big swings that, mood swings and tumultuous situations that come from clinging attachment and hatred and aversion. They bring us suffering. And so we must look to the cause of that. What is the cause of that? And the cause of that is this fundamental ignorance, this not knowing. And the fundamental ignorance is the cause of all of the destructive emotions and all of the mental upsets that we have in our mind stream. It is the cause of them. This ignorance is the cause. And actually the only way that we can eradicate this ignorance is to see into this, this intrinsic sense of a fixed reality. And we need to cut that notion, and we need to cut that fixation to there being a true reality. We need to eradicate it, because until that is eradicated, until that sense of a real outer reality, true fixed outer reality is exhausted, we will suffer. We will have these difficulties. We will have these swings where we're pleased and unpleased, where we obsess over something or are repulsed over something. And so we have to really do some deep introspection and some deep analyzation here into this situation and into these feelings. And so, for example, in the scriptures or in the teachings that we learn about what are what's the remedy here to some of these things, or what do we need to rely upon in order to realize emptiness. So we turn to the texts that give us the advice and the trainings on exactly how to do this analyzation. And so one should ask oneself, and this should be a constant ongoing process when you are engaged with something, when you are, having an experience, just look, how does that thing out there appear? Just stop yourself and just ask that question. How is it appearing? So you could take, a table, a chair, a person, an experience or a concept. How does it appear? And so first, define that for yourself. Secondly, then ask yourself the question, is it really like that? Is it just like that? And then, this is something again and again we should do. And then we can look and say, oh, no, actually, it's not like that. It came about due to causes and conditions. It's impermanent. It is interdependent on many things. And it may have seemed, and so ati again was what, Mark? It may have seemed very just. You have ati again.
Yeah, so I want to give you two. There's ate and atepa. That atepa, is reductionism. Persistently materializing.
Okay, persistently materializing.
And then ate by itself is personal phenomena which one takes for real.
Okay, yeah. And so I think, both of these work here. So this is a very particular, as you can see, a very particular word that Geshe-la used a couple of times here that he would like us to examine. So we will look and we will say, it is not like that. It's actually impermanent, and it is relative and interdependent. Although we take it, and I have seen it, I have been seeing it as persistently materializing, and something have been taking this for something that is very real. And so we will realize that it's not like that at all. Look what I've been doing all this time. And so this is a really useful, practical, and important process to take yourself through. And you will 100%, I guess, bring it down, reduce it, become a reductionist. You will reduce any of this nature out of that object 100%. And if you do that, if you take that out of the object, therefore one's attachment to it or repulsion towards it will automatically begin to decrease. And this is the way to block all of that mental disturbance and those arising emotions and so forth. And also within the sutras, and I can clarify this more later if I get the exact quote, but also in the sutras, the Buddha said that through one's realization of suchness, then one is able to materialize the accomplishment of Buddhahood. And so how is it that seeing suchness, meaning thusness, meaning the true abiding nature of something, how is it that this brings us to the accomplishment of Buddhahood? Well, we have to understand that we start from being in a place of ignorance, of not knowing, meaning not yet knowing the true nature. And so ignorance arises in our mind stream. But then once we have a realization of suchness, of the way things truly are, then automatically ignorance is eradicated and suffering is automatically cut. It is completely eliminated. And therefore, this is then one achieves Buddhahood. That's what the attainment of Buddhahood is the cessation of all suffering. And so this is not something that's easy to, this is the way the process works, and these are the ways that we can actually, techniques that we can employ to start that chain reaction, to actually be experiencing these things. But we really have to think about it. It's not easy, but it will really, really pay off and come to those realizations and understanding. And look back to those earlier quotes that we had. We had a quote earlier, "Di bayu dangdrawegi sikje yankep chiksoron nangisla."
Dijin tongi shena bayo yin susudo. Gaji kenla keba temachi, teni kiwi ranji yomani. Kela rale kanyin tongbarchet. Dijin tongi shena bayo yin. Jeza to zamo tongbanyi shena. Ani pe tenjin devar juma de shigri. Shiguyongor. Ti chiba ina kare kebareware. Yulgoni mazu tape chik karsora 주변 짐바데 가투고아레 디카나 뉴무 미케 팽거와 제상 밤에 차야지 녀몽 찍어래. 렌진디기 트람베 녀몽디기 밤에 찍어래. 제상 녀몽데 슈촌로에나 바이올 에 차고라 바이올 요라 동이 시나다 그 녀몽 슈촌로 게지게다만 누르와. 아니 가까지 동반이 무슨도 떠나 렌진 뱃때가 제일 매바 캔 거라. 렌진 뱃 순춘도 거라. 렌진기 밀 레 견게 거라. 뭐다 된주가라 동이 세야 돼. 동이 세다 다 장매기 동바 말와. 렘버 투비 동바와. 렘버지 렌진기 동와 시거와. 뭐다 때 시부지 삼당과야랑 아주 다 문이 가르쳐 그래. 중알 민도나 동이 달라 양양도 덴들당 자치 삼당과 빼미스 깨침보래. 텐진대원 중화가 텐이 동방이 두세. 텐이 따바이 닝이 오면 라미노 저 숨도. 다티 치도 다가서 치 삼나 마샤가지. 아니 수수 유토를 잘네 삼당 두보래. 텐진대원 중화 텐이 동방이 두세. 텐이 따바인 세드가라다 그상마세 최탐제 민 나다점 텐이 따바르마도 그런 거니 수두도 좀 되겠지 균이가 말했어. 베나타 삼다나 하고 당저 아메리카 프레지던스리지나 그배 가르 벌시스 망보스 sonje 애니 민드 따고도 애니 그 프레지던트 차그로마도 그 수두비야 나만 기디니 연구로와 연구민도 어때 저래다 민 따탄데 애니 그상 타니 두두산데서라 직 세디 숨요 기지 숨상고야 어때 저 빼면서 내쳐버려.
And so it really, we must think about it and actually use those former quotes because they're really quite useful in contemplation, self-reflection, and actually using them in order to come to a realization of the view or of these different points. And so in an earlier quote, there was the quote that spoke to when one sees that things are merely named and labeled and interdependence, one comes to see the emptiness in the objects, and seeing the emptiness, then one is conscientious. And so this is a really important point. When we realize emptiness, we become extremely conscientious and careful. And because of this realization and what is happening, it actually, from the realization, translates into our behaviors. So when we have realized emptiness, we've become conscientious, and we've said that through the realization of emptiness, we no longer have arising, disturbing emotions, these big emotional sways of love and hate and attraction and repulsion. So we are very careful. And we have to understand what is the opposite of being heedless and conscientious is heedlessness. And we know how that plays out. When we are heedless and not careful about our actions, then we are driven to all kinds of things, of stealing and lying and robbing. And if we think about those actions and in our mindset when we are involved in that kind of an activity, that's a very heedless, not a careful activity at all. And so when we are in the state of being very, very conscientious, we understand that the outer object is not established in the ways that we thought that they were. And realizing, so as it said in this quote, realizing emptiness or seeing directly the interdependent, dependent arising of all things, then automatically this mind that we had spoken about being both intrinsic and imputed, this embedded or imputed clinging to true reality in things, it's cut off. It's automatically cut off, and therefore the afflictive emotions are automatically cut off. And it's seeing emptiness that does this, seeing that there's no real thing out there the way that we took it to be persistently and constantly materializing and real. And so seeing emptiness directly, 100%, Geshe-la said, will have an impact for you in this way. And we must, though, once again, remember that when we say emptiness, we're not meaning nothingness, that it's a negation of anything at all. But what rather this means is that something does not possess any true existence, any true realness. And we have to come back to why, we're embarking on really seeing this point and coming to have a direct understanding of it. And it's because we don't want to suffer. And if we don't want to suffer, we need to take care of the cause of suffering. And we have to take care of what are the causes to get rid, or what is the path that gets rid of the cause of suffering. And the path that removes the cause of suffering is emptiness and dependent arising or interdependence. And so again, this view of Madhyamaka really comes down to this. So again, these quotes are very, very important. As we've learned in our study of the tenet system, we've learned about how things are nominally labeled, and we have imputed concepts and names upon them. So really use these quotes. Don't just cast them aside. It's very important. I mean, we can look at a very real, a very a situation such as someone being named the American president this week. At one moment they weren't a president, and in another moment they were a president. So they were named a president by means of convention. That's the presidentness in there, by means of convention. And we spoke earlier, and there was a quote again that was put out earlier, that in order for something to be established by means of convention, then 3 factors must be complete. So this quote was out there too, and you can revisit that quote.
Diane, can I ask a question?
Kanda Kandrishana Digirabege Geshe-la? Yes.
Yes.
Yes, please ask.
Okay, so I'm trying to understand when we're talking about whether things exist or not. Is it that there is no such thing at all as existence? Like our ideas of existence are completely wrong and nothing exists in the way that we understand it? Or is it rather that there are some things that exist, like Buddha mind and space, but that quality does not exist in the phenomena that we experience? Does that make sense to you? It's like, is it a matter of how we understand what existence is?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I can repeat it if you want me to.
Yeah, maybe repeat it one more time.
Okay.
Make sure I've got it.
So on the one hand, it may be that existence as we understand it isn't we have an incorrect understanding of what it means for something to exist. Like nothing really exists the way we think of it. On the other hand, it could be that there are some things that exist. It's just not the phenomena that we attribute existence to.
Okay, meaning the Buddha mind in space.
Right. Maybe those things exist, but the phenomena that we experience in our everyday life, that doesn't exist.
Ani ngatsu ani injikela exist brokela ani drup madrup ani ye me ani ngatsu ani pena chuji drup madrup ye dang me ani pena ngatsu gi samlo di drup dang madrup ye dang me la pelche ani koa ani yapo yomare ani di chikche pena di chirgi keba yomare chutamche gi keba yomare ngatso di yeme kare yimpa dela norpa ani pelche dire di chikche pensangi
yeah.
Yena ye me dang drup madrup ani pena deshin nyungpo dang namka ani drup dang yergere pena dirabe geshla namka dang
yoni supade yoni dode bakaya da sanjam bakaya tendi yonguro didi tsuba yongudo didi lento yongore kanchi 군섭도 타니도 양네 타니도 군섭도 예 아니 넘버 2에 넘버 2에 zulsamya meseya de dendireta kepartin jetu bore number 2 zulsamya mes number 2 ani pe number 2 sangi ku me lagra phumbo lejeme tel phumbo terde me tijin shaba phunde me tijin shaba kaji inzidgala tijin shabe kudu zuna number 2 tijin shabe pe tijin shaba ya mes de sungu ti sungu orwa number 2 ngola ke chen zulsamya tu bi amare chen yo amare number 2 tiji deshe nimbo yo amare number 2 tapa yo amare 가제 대신 님보다 탄이 되어래. 분석 되어래. 탄이 되어래.
So
이 개발된 제시가 왔다.
So to answer your question, actually, we can turn to some of the debates that we find within the philosophical tenet, the schools of the tenet systems themselves. So, for example, within the mind-only school, or ani tangpo de di konzop dang di sem sampadang
다 우마 탄교 일로 제자잖아.
uma tagyo
제자잖아. 시 담제 군속도 예. 군속도 상계예요. 대파처는 손놈 사예요. 아니도 예. 넘버 2봐. 가자라잖아. 넘버 2봐 둘섬이야매.
Okay.
아니 넘버 2에 아니 배 상기 구조매. 넘버 2봐 상계야매. 그래서 거라. 대 그산 자와셔럽 기티 벤닝지보다 풍면 풍부 레제메 텔라 풍부 때르데메 디진샤바 풍데메 디진샤바 간지인가 디진샤바 풍부다 넘버 2에 풍부다 넘버 말해서 순구다 이 두신 제베 있잖아 넘버 2에 몰라 아니 배 디진샤바 코랑요 말해서 순구다 어떤 두신은 랑라 삼다이나 풍면 풍부 레제메 텔라 풍부 때르데메 아니 다인 짐바스는 푼데민즈 다인 푼데민 다인 가라제데 다두스친 수술이 자르니나 두스 자르기도아 여름지 두스친 공파지기 숨도아 공파제나 수술이 자르니 공파제나 덴진달라 시부지 너그도 수송도아 맞아 아테긴 짐바데 케알레 핑겨레 맞아 차바해야 돼 이런 거는 닝저보죠 이런 건 코란이 옆에서 통과하러 와 이런 거는 여에나 미 죽을 따는 사다 말하지 용 쉐야 그런 요 말와. 오늘 에 맞아 미 죽을 따요다 제당해서기 딱 공로해서 일들라 미 죽으면 미 죽 말은 미 죽었대 미텔라 미네 공로해 말와.
미추.
미주요나
미추스나?
미 말아서 가사주 히부주 장가주 미주요나
잠깐.
미주기 미질 미텔라 때는 배 콘도사기나 제마 미주디기 콘도사기 말와 미게우데 이 율문이 콘도케야 율 미데엠베 율문 수투도 메비 따테로와 코 소소기 로친지로 삼로 친지로기 아니 코 이도 뭐야 배 당의 율질리 소소기 징기 얼마도 율고 고랑은 뚜디요 말와 와타테소 노스 랑라 파네 삼당 거르데기 야니양도 삼당 텐텐테 펜도용 그래 즉 어때서 개발해요래 아주 삼당 과다 수수 란텐을 빠고 란텐을 삼당 거래 자르투나 이 귤에 자르투니 삼당 투베나 데 펜도용 거래
Olaso. And so it is indeed, a matter of what we're saying, of what we're attributing into the word existent or not existent, and the tenet systems help us break that down. So, for example, the Prasangika Madhyamakas say that actually there is existence in things conventionally. There is conventional, that things do have conventional existence. They exist by means of, for example, labeling and naming and parts and so forth, that they exist conventionally. But they don't exist ultimately. Not even a particle's worth of absolute true existence exists. So they're saying it exists conventionally, does not exist ultimately. And so, as for, can we then make the distinction between some objects? Some objects exist, but for example, Buddha nature does not exist. Well, then we turn to, I think it's Umasawa Sharp, the root verses, fundamental verses of the Middle Way by Nagarjuna, where Nagarjuna says, in examining the Tathagata, he is not the aggregates, he is not other than the aggregates. The aggregates are not in him, he is not in them. The Tathagata does not possess the aggregates. What is the Tathagata? So we can see actually even, Buddha nature outside of being existent conventionally is something we can speak about, something we can write about. We can place and impute conventions on it. So conventionally it exists, but ultimately, as it says here, the aggregates and the Buddha do not even exist. And so really, when we are coming to that view, like the view that we just read, he is not the aggregates or other than the aggregates, not in him, he is not in them. The Tathagata does not possess the aggregates. What is a Tathagata? What this is really striking down is that clinging to a true reality, actually the very, very deep clinging to a true reality of things that are perpetually materializing, that really deep embedded fixation that they, or just even, it's just there for us. It's almost like intrinsic or innate. It's our natural like default mode. That's what cuts it down. This last quote here. And so therefore, when we begin to apply this, these four lines to all phenomena, we'll see that, there is nothing innately out there. And therefore, what happens is that object that we find beautiful or desirous or something awful and repulsive, upon examination, applying the same formula, upon examination, it's not there. Intrinsically, from its own side, there is no thatness there. And so, for example, Geshe-la said, maybe you really hate someone. You think they're awful, nasty, terrible. There are 10 people, let's say, and you find this one person awful and horrible and nasty to the bone. They're just no good. Well, if that were really true, coming from the side of that object, all 10 people would feel the very same thing. They would see the very same thing. But we know from our own personal experience that's not the case. If there are 10, 9 other people in the room, everyone isn't going to feel the same way. That's because this is something that was imputed from the subject side. This was something that was very subjective, that came from the mindset of the mind that was apprehending that object. And so there was a negative or even, perverted, backward subjective view lens being imposed upon that subject. Or that object, I'm sorry. So this, again, this particular quote is a really, really useful quote. And Geshe-la said he demonstrated using it for himself or using it for my own name. And any of us could use this for our own names and really begin to investigate what am I? And, this is really what we need to do. So to answer your question, there are different levels of what it means to exist, and those are defined. We can go back to our examples of defining what is conventional existence. I think that was defined earlier. But when it comes down to it ultimately, and when you're looking through the Madhyamaka view, there is no true existence in anything at all, even down to Buddha and Buddha mind and the Buddha's aggregates.
Si tamang de sigurjaya de garmuchigi de pe the huge pembudu the garmuchi guru nangi sungda garmuchinju gan send minga lamuturu jugora lamuturu yarmu bu kable mingde and garmuchi pe fumen Pumbo legeme, tela pumbo terdeme, lamotum tundu fundeme, lamotundu kaji inzerdu, se compachegis. Dindela, ta lamotundu see that Tashi Chayona, tell you the color, lamotundu say the Raya Kona Yomara, Pumpesem Raya Mido. Timar Maraya, you couldn't sutu to me with Tadrawa. Tangy to me the Sungo Mara. Sututu. I take in Zimbabwe, then pay you crung, you money over Zingi or a theater. Oh, there is the Shukchumuchi or one Zimbabwe. Oh, those sometimes, you won't never the Totudo or Rana Jarna. What are the Shibuji? That the Mangara, your money and a Mangara, around with some township or that the Yan Joga Karma Jews or Karmanga or Karmani, so then they told us, see the summertime during the tea, and it tell us summertime yet any Karsa, you don't win Matu Nepajing, some local Kansam Corina, then it 10 in June saying they give him Telemang Tungrua.
Dilemanga, eh?
Oh, you send that Tungrua, 10 in June. You want the one, you want a crime into the Chili Chitangela, some Jungurua. Guletten and Divuletten, Guzele, Ming Tagar Mado, go, you two to Bajida, Divutu to Bajit, 10,000 in Mel, Nepajing Yabaina. Cook, Ming, 당에 민 따점지 두바데 하고 그러. 인도가라 가서 그상 당에도 두세더라. 당에도 따바스. 내가 니베 당에도 처음에 민어 봐스. 내가 돈담 주지게 처음에 민어 봐스데 당에도 두산들라 기지 숨 창고도 와. 그래서 내 쳔버리 가서 미세 강파 삼을 당고야 요래. 디티데도.
So His Holiness the Dalai Lama has actually given this as an instruction and has said over and over again that he uses this verse as a meditation, as a training. And he takes the last two lines in particular, and when His Holiness the Dalai Lama, when he was young, he was called Lama Tundrup. Lama Tundrup. And so he would repeat the last two lines over and over again using his name Lama Tundrup. The Lama Tundrup does not possess the aggregates who is Lama Tundrup or what is Lama Tundrup. Over and over again, he would say these lines, and he would contemplate this. And he came clearer and clearer through the use of this technique. And he came to the point of understanding where he realized that Lama Tundrup could not be found. He could not find Lama Tundrup. And if it's not Lama Tundrup, then what is it? Well, it must be, it's an appearance, it is a name, it is a label, it is a concept. And that's the point that we will come to when we apply this same formula to the examination ourselves. And we will see that there is not something upstanding in and of itself called that, but that it's something that is a convention or something that appears to us in a certain way. And what happens is this really strong, perpetual clinging to something as real, or that something that perpetually materializes as real, and therefore we automatically feel it's real. We will stop doing this with our, the objects and the things that we relate to or that we come into contact to. This really changes our relationship with the world and really cuts down an old reality that we were really fixed to. And we should all understand that this actually is a Pith Instruction. And this is a Pith Instruction that was given from His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and take it as a very profound Pith Instruction.
Diane? Oh,
Mm-hmm.
sorry. I thought you were done.
And so for 2 or 3 or 5 minutes or so, actually take this verse. Again, it was posted earlier. Take this verse and sit with it and really meditate with it. Say it over and over again using your name for 2 minutes or 3 minutes or 5 minutes, and then sit and contemplate that meaning and really let it sink in and really sit with that. This is something very profound, and what we come to understand is that objects are not existing in the way that we thought them to be. And what actually begins to unfold in our experience is what unfolds before our eyes is really we see into or see back a few steps into how one thing led to another, led to another, led to another, and now we have this person or this object or this concept. And it really sinks in, and it really dawns on us in a very deep way that things the relativity of and depend that they our existing independence on so many series of former events and conditions, and then we name it that, and we solidify it as that. We solidify it. We almost are putting a branding on it, this mental branding, and solidifying it as that. It doesn't have any of that, but we're solidifying it in that way. And so also earlier there were the three, again, those 3 points on how things are made known by convention, such as these are things that have general acclaim. They have been perceived by the knowing a perception, have been cognized as that. There are these 3 points. Go back to those. If anyone doesn't have them, also you can go to Facebook or Slack and find them, or contact me and I can send them out again. But really go back to those 3 and think about them and understand that that's the way that conventional reality has been established by this subjective mind.
Okay, question real quick. Geshe-la, cały szerobny leju niszczyca ni szaluka dampo?
Sholoka kozo ina hakumasu.
Szaluka dampo. There, I've gone ahead and posted that quote it's from Nagarjuna's Mula Madhyamaka Karika, chapter 2, verse 1. Neither the aggregates nor different from the aggregates. The aggregates are not in him, nor is he in the aggregates. The Tathagata does not possess the aggregates. What else is the Tathagata?
Mm-hmm. And what was it in Sanskrit?
Mula Madhyamaka Karika.
Okay, and for English, I believe it's the root verses of the middle way.
Yeah, foundational verses.
Or fundamental verses of the middle way, depending. So if you have that in English, you can look at chapter, what was it?
Chapter 22.
So Geshe-la is just also confirming, yes, it is the chapter on the complete analysis of the Tathagata in chapter 22. Thank you, Mark.
Welcome.
수투도 두바시도 땐 자원이 민도 선대갈 때갈 동상 때갈 아니 링이 샘데 karma지 가져에 내 차에 버든 네트워크이나 따띠 똥이고 막 뭐마다 차고 왔다 담보는 조금 되갈 아니 배 네바니네 같이 하기 수투도 두베 때까 섬지 동상지 차리 차야질래나 이따 똥이고 막 뭐마다 차고 와래
Laso tampo ani jogom
제곰
or laso, yeah.
제곰도 제빠체네 내니페 zembartu와시 땐 자원이 민도 삼삼지 레기로와 아니 때갈 가져야지 동상 때갈 내차 가져지 버든 karmachi 가져 내게나 다 곰배 간디 같이 링엔 니그로와 같이 곰바 뉴뉴네 때문에 듣고 말아와 What the one woman chagore. The mother meets them those in the Nateo. Home gashi dinsa Temba Kang Mintane homes lagadot. It's not cash of home. Then there's the Shimitas and Ninjabu Degadope, meets them the day of the George or Ninjabu Degadoa. Tenshi Tenya, the Temba the Shilling cut you in a tengore. Jogum Chegum Katina. 나랑도 템바다 시징이 템바이나 레가시나 차 추부용 그렇다 내가 가르치기나 칼라지기는 미카시 칼라즈도 뻑뻑가서 쉬셔도 와 템바 텐시 야보메 따르데
카레 콘소 아니 카레 아니
미리지 칼라즈도 갈라 니가리지 마이나 칼라딘디니 케인도 쉬는 강가 쉬셔도 와 잡어주고도 와 떨어주고도 와 텐시 야보메라 칼라 텐시 야보메나 칼라자시고 말해 하나 denshi misibe kan temba de shiring bet ke chembor ta khatu ina.
And so now how so again this quote that we can use as a contemplation can be brought into analytical meditation. And we have to understand the process of authentic meditation. And authentic meditation really starts with analytical meditation. So meaning there is a thought or a concept or a principle that one is contemplating and mulling over and thinking about and has in their mind, something they're working with, a thought that they're working with, a concept that you're working with, because it's really examining something in meditation and through different directions, like through different angles and through different understandings, that one meaning really dawns on one. One really comes to the true meaning. So, for example, right now we're speaking about coming to the deep understanding of the lack of any intrinsic true existence in phenomena, in things. And when we work with it in analytical meditation, we will come to the deep, deep realization, a deep and true, real deep and authentic realization that these things are not really like that. That meaning that which we have taken them, the reality that we have given them all this time. And this becomes really clear when we're meditating in this analytical fashion. We will all of a sudden really come to, maybe it's just a glimpse or a short moment, that chair or that table, whatever, it's not really like that. And this is this is revealed to us. This is a realization of a revelation that we come to when we can really say after this period of time that it's things are not there in the way that my mind has taken them to be. And so we come to that understanding and then sit with that and meditate as long as you can. Things are not there in the way that my mind has taken them to be. And some people can't meditate as long, you know, some people it's shorter, some people it's longer, but just sit with that thought and just let that sit and let that sink in. And so that's the way we bring analyzing. So actually some intellectual, analytical work while we're meditating, during meditation. And, you know, that's what authentic meditation is. Authentic meditation isn't this, you know, there's this kind of this new, mindfulness, just sit there, close your eyes and be mindful. Well, Geshe-la says, look how, you know, peaceful and pleasant, you know, kitty cats sit like that too, just zoning out. You know, kitty cats are happily just sitting there, just, you know, eyes closed and still. You know, that's not what authentic meditation is. Not only do kitty cats meditate, they also say mantra, right? So once they're like, they get into like they're really zoned out in their happy mindfulness meditation, before you know it, they're purring and purring. That's their mantra. Then they're saying mantra and meditating. Geshe-la said. But what we need to bring into this, you know, it is important. We're not like totally making fun of being mindful. But what Geshe-la says, it's not a zoning out kind of a thing. It's actually we're zoning in. So we need to be mindful and alert. at all times. And if we can learn to carry that in all of our moments, that's what we're looking to do. Be mindful, so focused, but alert and aware. So so it's active. So we have this active mindfulness. So it's active. And so we have a focus and then we have alertness, you know, as well. So we have an alertness, a real vigilant. Has my mind strayed? Am I straying into negative thoughts, discursive thoughts, negative thoughts? And so we constantly have to be like focused, have a focus and alertness of whether or not we have lost that focus. And that's really important. Just like we have watch guards and we have police. The watch guards are watching out to see, you know, what if everything is law abiding or not, and if they're the ones that notice when there is someone who is not law abiding, and the police come in and assert action in you know, in taking action. And so we as well have to be alert. Has our mind gone into something that is negative? And so there's that alertness and the mindfulness to set it back on virtue or back on its object. We always must have those, and we must be placing what we're trying to, I guess, arrest here or work with here is the mental state, negative mental states, or even physical. I guess it's just negativity. And so we can see when someone who is not mindful at all times, you know, there might be someone who can be mindful on their cushion, but then when it comes to eating, you know, just not even paying attention if it's going in the mouth and the, you know, food is falling, you know, lost the attention and focus on, you know, on that eating. And actually it's really, if we really, so we have this alertness and focus, and then actually we have to be careful that we don't lose it. So we have to really like keep that activity at all times, whatever we're doing, saying or thinking.
The George Polde Adichik Sunare. Dendan Shinshi Bayope, Wambo Gonam Tato Suns, Wambo was it, Marando Chadang, Wambo did Chadamusum di Dangyong Gorwa. Dangyong Gorwa, Wambo Gonam Tato Suns, Nindang, Ninsen Tusum, Yangdang Yang Singdo, Ninsen Kodin Yang Yandu, some Tangores, Simgula Taparjas, Singular Tipe, Dendeshi. Denshi Bayo any Susem Cotina Charache or Susundua.
Any Semgu Takbajar?
Oh, Semgula Taparjas, Susu Simgula Nipe, Cotina Taji Chegores, Tamung King women there, Karachek do this Shijingi Charachegura, Tembagi Nipe, Mamakan Shebat, Turi Zemaju in there, Tembi Chavarawa. Shijingi Telekyung women do Sobachigora. 잘하지. 미시고 개침부터 네 그상을 땅여래. 네 빼야는도 삼당과 빼게 전부도 와. 된다 시제 바에 원배고는 따도 숨지. 인생 뒤숨 양다양 심기줄라 따버자스. 심기줄라. 수수수 심기를 슈다당 거 그뒤나. 대 야르겐 누구래? 대마다 야르겐 로예요 말에.
And so,
자다나 축균 소야요 말와 강가자도로와 And Tringen, the Semgula Jarmatuina, Ko Yundin Lab Misegi Pentoyum Wamare. Got you in a Charache. Some of them Charache, those China, Yargen Duguri. Pentoyore.
And so also Joel Atisha has said that using strong conscientiousness and focus, one should constantly protect the doors of the senses. One should guard the doors of the senses, because it's actually through the sense doors that we are led out, or we are led into affliction and negativity. And then further more in that quote, day and night, one should always be focused, and one should constantly examine the state of their mind. And so when we are constantly examining the state of our mind and being careful about, have I swayed from being careful and being positive and being virtuous? It's through conscientiousness that so we must be conscientious and we must be focused. Our focus will keep us on on the right path. So if the path is virtue and goodness, then our focus will keep us there. And our vigilance and our alertness will see if we are making mistakes. And so it is the guard that's saying, is that one following the rules or not following the rules? And it is really the one that does the analysis. So there are two things in play. There's focus and there's analysis, kind of an analytical part of mind, this observant part of mind that is observing, is the state of the mind virtuous or negative? And it is the one that analyzes, and then there is a focus that is a concentration that is then concentrated towards the right focus. And so these two are really very, very important for us to constantly be employing. And then so maybe we take a little break here. We can stop for a break.
Yeah, that Pajan Mareta. Yeah, that. Tanguning that Zubayong the Karzana. Senzam Badan, Dodebatezogi, Chutamje, the number 2 killing Gorwa. Then to the killing in the Umape Dembermeba killing in the gala, Dembermeba the Temelacone, Demberme Zidugala, Temelacone. And in that Uma Tanju was the Cheltawaresha, the Labor, the Ingu Umapet Tea Nitilago Medas. So, but say I get Jide Tiungor, that is Jide Hago package. Nitilag metas, Zember Med Sidigala, Maransu Nang on the Gala, Yumi Yovaji Nangi to us. Nang Sultana Jinjime, said Lagu Mato. 10 year marzel lagi mares. Thank you to your race. What a
no, I lost Gishi. Did we lose Gishila? Oh, Gishila, Tanda, okay. Tanda Dramandu Kirangi, the Marpo ki takti takgori. Oh, Pogudu.
Uma Beladugala, Nidember Messiade. Maranzu Nangundugala, Yulmun Tutu Yoji Nangidu was. Tenaji Mess Lagio Mato, Then you are like your martas. And thank you to your tanta Kazani, the Tagini Kachishere. Thank you to your ace. Thank you to any pay. Shoot him to Jajete to do your ace Sungorwa. Jita Topa Yonse Jiditire. That thing to Gala, Tati, thank you will tower the Garoj Magona, Kuni Sopa Giptan, the Ham Magona, Yanchi, Tata and Digumarwa. Tindugala, thank you will tower the Tawa Nane, Tawa Tashodre, Tardutri, Tichi Hako at the package more.
And so, in regard to zeroing in on what's happening during these philosophical, debating these philosophical points and what conclusions the refinement of the debate brings us to, we look back at the Vaibhashikas and Sautantrikas, so the first two, the lower two schools. These two schools posit an actual existence and accept an actual existence in phenomenal objects. However, the Prasangika Madhyamakas do not. They do not accept any true existence in phenomena. And so the two lower schools as well say that when something is non-existent, when they do posit non-existence, they posit non-existence in a way that they say that there is no existence, then there is zero existence. There has never been existence from the basis. There has, from the start, it has never existed. That's what non-existence means to them, to the first two schools. But the Madhyamakas, Prasangika Madhyamakas say that is flawed. When you say there is no existence, there's never been existence, they do not exist at all, you are wrong. And you are falling into the view of nihilism. So that's the debate, that's the basis of their debate. And that's really important to understand. What is the point that's being debated? What is the basis of what their debate stands, upon which it stands? And that's it. They're saying that to say something doesn't exist at all, period, in any way, that is nihilism. And when the Prasangika Madhyamakas say that there is no true existence, what they're saying is that it appears out there, but it's not like that. What is non-existent, or what is not, or what is being negated, is that it exists like that. That's what is not existing. That is what is non-existing. What is non-existing is that it exists as it appears. And conventionally, phenomena do exist. They exist at the level of conventions. And so it's very, very important that we know the finer points that bring about that conclusion in the Prasangika Madhyamaka view. Because if we don't know the finer points of what brings them to the final conclusion, then we won't really understand the conclusion as a whole. We won't have a holistic understanding of what brought them to that conclusion. And that's why understanding these finer points is very, very important.
그상 티 반자 쇼로가 지바들에 지템 파이 뭐 통신 양당이 또 떠지기 유마도 보미 빈들 나저 받은 지템 세숭도 쇼로가 지바들에 어떻게 가르라거래 지템 파이 뭐 통신에서 된 지템 바즈도 갈라 도대파 센잠 받기들이 그래서 율문이 여바 하기 사와단타 빼 매단 출라서 봐 사와 율문이 여바데 때 민둘라베이나 티 가르라고 거레스 티빼 연에 통고로 또고로 바실라고 봐 고졸라 된동 유마토 보아니 빼 송바니 때로 일 추고 말아 맞추 인자 에 된동 유마토부터 내게 우마바당 마토베 딴 지템 바땡이 어따 저바테 티추고 거레스 사실 지바데 솔로가 지바데 인기래
Jiktempa yi ngur tongshin ni yangdakni dirbe.
양당이 또 떠제기 유말떡으로 미빈들 나저바단 지텐츠 나저파시디가라 우마 턴주와레 다 지텐 바즈디가라 도데바다 센잠바티기들이 유르문이 뭐부든도 켈랭에 둠다티기들이
Ani di gyuma kare.
유마타 전통 유마토보다 대주고 또요 말와 도데바 대주고 공도 맞추 인자 마토바 인자 지든 전통 유마토부 또한데겐 똥이 또한데겐 가자 턴주와다 애니베 마토벤 지템 바딩이 좁아져 그래스 라진 여메기 어떻게 저번 영세 지다티 때지 다티 오니 다 렌데즈 용거래 렌데즈 용라 다 도데바당 뭐마로 지가파 제 선잠바가파 통이 또벨 람 우메 고니메 포폰 와즈데 저번 디너베 sabje 숨타인 거래
아니
다디 대수다 제마 용거라 난디 빼자 대반도 디지 구르거든 간디스 구르고
Okay, jela ngato.
야야
De salere.
디는 디 sabje 더번 찾는 빼 야부 용거라
Aha. Okay.
sabje 빼 내가 춤어다
Ani ngoma ani kerangi ngala ani korsange.
아마 그렇게 되다 이 부그래도
Di chekore. Okay.
디다 슈구따다 내기면도 니는 슈구따다요래
Lasso.
배지
Okay.
찌뿌찌경이요
That's sure. Culture.
솔로가
Okay.
집바들에
Okay, di serbodo yanayang ani di ibok di nang
디나는 용말에 따따다 내기면도
lasso. Okay. So if we go back to now getting back to our main text, actually. So we've talked about the import of understanding the different points that are debated out. And if we go back to the Way of the Bodhisattva, chapter 9, in my translation, this is coming out to be verse number 6. In some translations, the way this beginning of 9 is broken up, it could be different. It could be 5. I'm sorry, yeah, it could be, in mine it's 5. In some it could be 6. Where it says, when ordinary folk perceive phenomena, they look on them as real and not illusory. This then is the subject of debate where ordinary and yogis differ, when ordinary folk and yogis differ. So this verse, this fifth verse in chapter 9, is speaking exactly, about what was just said, about understanding the debate. And what is the debate over? And the debate is between, well, first of all, the debate is between, when it says yogis, this means the Prasangika Madhyamakas. So the Madhyamaka, the middle way proponents, and ordinary, meaning the the Sautantrika and the mind-only school. So it is because the illusory like and empty nature that has been seen by the Madhyamakas has not yet been seen by the lower schools here, or the ordinary. The ordinary is still purporting some kind of real nature to things. Whereas in the Prasangika Madhyamaka, they posit no true intrinsic nature whatsoever. And so this is the debate, saying, well, you see them as illusory-like, yet you still find nature in them, and we find no true intrinsic nature. So it's a subject of debate to the lower schools, and then after that, an answer then comes up next. So this point or this debate is answered. Mm-hmm. And so then what comes on next is an answer to debating the point of whether there is true existence or not. Oh, did I lose Geshe-la again?
La.
Oh, okay. La so.
That thing the galata, Dode Pasindi, Dan Sensambado, Ko Yurmun Mena, Temel Kodugora, Kokamido, Koran Tuntewangi. Yadanta Umatangiwe, Yurmun Men Mebatamgi, Zember Yurmun Tutu Matuba Tamgi. Teme chago marwa. Teme karzana tangi tu chase kanga jatunge. Yul zembawaji mendegen kepran jesingin ji chagora. Uma tangi wasidi.
And so the Sautantrika, Sautantrika and Chittamatras say that if they find that an object isn't truly existing, so part of the way they posit the lack of a truly existing object is that they completely negate it. It's completely negated. However, with the Prasangika Madhyamakas, it is not at all fully negated. They're saying it's not really like that it appears, but it is not at all fully negated. And so this is the point here this is the point that things hinge on, that this debate is hinging on. It's how an object doesn't exist, and whether it's fully negated or not fully negated. That's what the debate hinges upon.
Yeah, ta dus che ne lende hafta jemani ngazo ti kiran tepten jorsona eni ngazo di odin drona yabu yonsare
Ola suna.
dimma that the subject is tata chi lutu ina yabu yonguru temato 이 그상에 이분의 땅에 당에 로겐 이 가가차도 가가잖아요. 야 따단 되기입니다.
Oh, lasso, tatari. And so Geshe-la said he'd like to save that answer to start fresh next week, the next time we meet, because he has, so this is my addition. It doesn't go into details here with the answer, but in other texts, it's more detailed. And so Geshe-la has a text that is very detailed that he can follow along. And if he sends it to me, we can follow along. We can all follow along together more easily. So the actual points of the debate aren't written in the way of the Bodhisattva, but they are written in other places that he can more fully expound on them. And so we can start there the next time.
그런 다 주제 나다 체가 생기도 계속 깔면은 뒤어진이 땅스러워.
So we do have time though. It's almost 5:30, but Geshe-la said he would like to take 1 or 2 questions here. If you have them and if you're up to it.
I would just ask what other texts we might be looking at.
That you could find in English?
He's talking about discussing next week. Yeah. If it may or may not be in English.
It's not going to be in English.
Okay.
But let me double check on that, William. Ani Geshe-la, ani kerang jema gi kurgi ani yigi dedi poyik chikpo nangla yamana injikela yang gyori ani
인지는 말말 보이 리데데 데비 집지게 나가니 쇼랑 가다다 튕기로와.
He might be holding something up. I've lost my view, so I don't have a screen. He may be holding up a book right now.
Yes, yeah.
He is. Okay. He says that it's only in Tibetan. And yes, and right now he's not satisfied with an ebook version because there are differences, but he says it's only in Tibetan.
Okay. Thank you.
We studied, when we studied the tenets before, it was from a book called Cutting Through Appearances. I don't know if that would be of use for you to look at ahead of time or not, or maybe even look at after Geshe-la teaches next week.
Okay. Ani Geshe-la ngoma kerang di drupta gi kola jang du concert injitone Cutting Through Appearances ani pena nangwa.
tumdar 인제 통. tumdar 인제 통하래. 어디 펜더 쉬운 거래.
Okay, yeah, I guess Jewel Garland of the Tenets. So it's based on, I'm assuming, Jewel Garland of the Tenets, Geshe-la said that he was teaching on Jewel Garland of the Tenets. So is that a translation? Cutting Through the Appearances, is that a translation? Oh, okay. So if we could look at it before next week, if anyone has that, would
그런 줄로도 배 펜도 연 거라. 나는 또 다시 따와도 많아 설보여래.
So if anyone has that, it would be really useful for you to review before next week or kind of look over, because it really does go through the points of the different tenet systems. And Jeffrey Hopkins, Geshe-la said, was translated it into English.
When Geshe-la was discussing earlier suchness being the true abiding nature of something, and maybe we need to take this up next week, if he could talk a little more about what is true abiding nature.
Mm-hmm. Ani dekona nis labna dene di chugi neluk di ngoma di neluk ani dene di triwadire dene neluk seria nelux ani dela ani kawakari lengorela yana di ani tapo yana dene duntra jema ki kola lana yang ani
그들의 내루시대라라 다 춘이시야 내루시야 동이시야도 고아직벌에 우마탄규루라 직배직양래
우마
탄규루라
tal Georgi lugla chikpare namgyun ani shana chikpare dekonani dang chugi nelu
래 인규래
Mhm. So
대
actually,
코나니 시디가라 최디기 내루듯이 럽거와
mhm,
대 코나니 디지니 양다타 최담적이 내루 제다 지바르다 동니세 라지메 파세야 대수 민기 남다래
mhm. So there are many terms that, different terms that hold the same meaning. And here, in this case, this is one of them. So in Tibetan, it's Dekonani,
대지니
Dejinyi,
주니
Chuni,
동니
Doni, uh-huh,
대수 강아
Rangjin Mepa.
라지메바
Mhm. So they're synonymous terms or phrases because it's very, very hard to, so many different ways, terminologies and phrases are used to try to point to something that is very hard to describe.
Right.
And so when we have like Dekonani, you could call that suchness. You can call it the true abiding nature. And that's the term in English that I chose to use because in English, we could call it the natural state. We could call it suchness. We could call it emptiness. It's called many different things. For me, the true abiding nature, it really says, that particular one speaks to me. It all means the same. And all of these things, emptiness, suchness, true abiding nature, the true mode of abiding is another way that I have heard it translating. It all means the same thing. It just means the natural state. One way that authentic state, the natural state, suchness, emptiness, lack of intrinsic nature is also a way. So there's one like negative, like a negate, kind of coming from the negative aspect, some, lack of any true nature.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
yeah
Again, I don't know if we have time, but I initiated a question last week that Geshe was going to elaborate on if we had more time this week.
Can you, and if I remember correctly, is realizing the lack of self of the individual and realizing emptiness the same thing? Or do you want to?
Yeah. And he kind of said real simple answer, but I didn't know if you wanted to add more to that or not.
Ani tongpa ni gito ani toya dang ani gangzak gidame ani toya chikpare kakare dekola chiksungro chela.
tate 간사가 다음에 시디가라 동이 지마치진 또발라 동이 시디가라 다 동이 지마치진 다 간사가 다음에 주기 다음에 니르 다음에 발라 간사가 다음에 신이 참아 또발라 주기 다음에 마도나 간사가 다음에 신이 참아 또 두 마리 숨고래 이 겨울무지 냠뇽숭도 겨울무지 아마 라동 첨모숭도 그 라동 첨모로가 인스 라동 첨모로 어디가 라동 첨에 나라니 배 길타나 간사 시담제 간사가 다음에 봐서 시지어다 이도는
시 카레라 sikje karen
라동 첨이 시지다 간사가 다음에 때문에 중디 치디 로용도가라 닝라 사슈기 겹송스
오레레레
사슈 갸디가라니 티디 디치디가라니 페 간사 코랑가라 사무단도가라 마저라 랑캬와디지 매버지 하고 두시 풍부간 삼당 용도가라 대 란지 매바 풍부 란지 매바데 더둥 케미도 수숭도 제자 송이 다 지마지진 가사가 다음에 참우 이 지마지진 도발라 당부 풍비 상기디 란지 매바 또나 디니 가사가 상라 마 자래라 케야라 레라 용거레스 그럼 아주 풍부된 진데 슈충부 아주 길로 공부하러 주기 다음에는 답에 주라면 망보여래 저저 아주 풍부가랑 아주 린진의 슈체 용거로 와 그뒤나 수년도 연자 제가 풍부 린진데 마가 버도 아니 배 주기 다음에 간사가 다음에 참도 두 마리 쓴 거래 간사가 다음에 참도 발레 주기 다음에 참도 그랬어 엄마 던지올라 간사가 다음에 참도 주기 다음에 참도 니가 똥이래
엄마
던지 니가 똥이래 가자 된루가에 직발해
라서
다지기 잡아 잡아래 다지지 풍소 잡아래 지 가자 잡아라 가자 란지 매바도나 가자가 다음에 풍소 란지 매바도 언더가 주기 다음에 참 잡아래 발라 주기 다음에 참도 방문도 누구 그래 제순거래 니가 똥이래
So in order for one to realize selflessness of the individual, or to realize like the emptiness of a self of the individual properly, exactly as it is, it's taught that one must first be able to see the emptiness of phenomena. And it's said that if one doesn't first realize the emptiness of phenomena first, then one cannot quite get to realize the emptiness of self, the emptiness of individual. And His Holiness the Dalai Lama has spoke and said that he was reading this text called Lathong Chemo, which is the great treatise on superior insight. And he was reading in the section on the emptiness of phenomena, and a real feeling like he was reading it and he was studying it. It was like a lightning struck to his very core, to his heart, to his mind. It was visceral, and he just had this like physical experience hit him when he was reading about these verses about expounding about how phenomena are empty of intrinsic existence, or they're empty. And he had this feeling, he really felt it. But then, even though he felt like that, he really had an experience of that, then in terms of, he still couldn't get to the point of a lack of self in his, like in these aggregates, like a lack of an individual, emptiness of any real existing individual. It's still, that didn't occur. He still felt that. And so, because he really didn't, he really couldn't come to his own physical aggregates as being empty. And it's within the physical it's within aggregate things and material phenomena that we really must first understand emptiness. And so until we eradicate a fixation of a notion, like almost this instinctive notion of any trueness, true nature and reality, we can't do it yet in ourselves. However, within the Prasangika Madhyamaka view, the realization is twofold. It's a spontaneous, like a twofold realization. When you realize the Umatal Jorwagi
Matangu Lula,
Lula Young
Kazaga Dame, Tanchuki Dame Siade, Gachakaya Chikpachikyare, Daji, Punso Gatandu, and Gachakana, Chuki Damere, and Daji Kazaga Tandu. But
within the tradition of the Prasangika Madhyamaka, the object of negation is the same. The basis that's being negated actually is the same. When you have, it's just that, so the emptiness that's, or the selfness that's being negated is the same. So any existence of self is being negated. It's the same basis of, it's the same thing that's being negated, but there are two bases that it's being negated on. Existence in phenomena, or existence of an individual. So it's just that the basis is different. It is the same negation. So I'm trying to make this as clear as it sounds in Tibetan. So when you're negating, so when it's selflessness of an individual, it's just that it's existing on a basis of an individual. And in the second case, it's existing on the basis of a material phenomena. So, a phenomena, a chair, a table. So it's just the basis that's different, but the negation is actually the same. They happen, it's the same thing. It happens at the same time. It's just they're different bases.
네, 석유계 비가 가자 그다음에 라바데 또 인서레스. 참도요 사마레스 송도. 참도요나 분비상도 답에 된다에 린두도 까투고라 때도 까투민도 송도. 이 배진아 따가라래. 간사 그다음에 참도 발라. 간사 그다음에 참도 발라. 주기 다음에 또 방문도 로어서 송도래. 다 간지 나랑도 풍부된 두 까고 와야 돼 빼미시고 깨지 뭐 풍부된 두 까마투비 있나 간사가 다음에 참은 또 두고 말해 가보래 인들라다 되게 랍제는 가사 우마자와 셰라브나라 랍제닝이 바데 디시샤바다 연두가라 땅부 풍부간라 디 제바제는 것도 그네 내가 지는 뜻은 때마다 내가 지면은 숨마라 나랑도 풍부들 거디나 지금 말해도라 가르쳐버려 풍부든 데니다 빼 자동 무슨 게 릴란 용도 와다 띠 내가 채여래 딘디가랑 가지고 윤도 삼당과도 빼게 쳐버려
And so, therefore, in bringing this all to a deeper level of understanding, we should know that it's said and taught and spoken of in the scriptures that the finer point of realizing the lack of self in an individual, in these aggregates, in this person, that's a finer process than the realization or revelation, the realization of lack of intrinsic existence or the selflessness of phenomena. That's why it said that if one realizes first the selflessness in phenomena, that one can then go to the realizing the lack of true existence of the self, of the person. And so a little bit of a correction going back with what His Holiness said. His Holiness was studying the lack of, when he was reading the Laktong Chemo ani dene gyalo rinpoche Laktong Chemo dene jalok di gangzaki
오 드디 간사 다음에 라파타 있어레스
rapa.
아무도 또 있어 말레스 아무도 또 매베까 가르잖아 풍부간사 삼당도 갈라 대나진지 레기미두스.
And so when he was, when he was reading that treatise on superior insight, he was reading about the lack of true existence in a person. And he did feel that. So it wasn't in phenomena. It was actually of the self of the person. He did feel that and have an experience. However, even at that level, there is the coarse clinging to the person, to a person in and of these aggregates, and the subtle clinging. And he had a purification or realization of the coarse aggregate person, but not of the subtle. And that's why when he left reading and left that experience and went out and began to associate again very much with himself, it's because he hadn't gotten to the finer or the more subtle clinging to the aggregates in the person. And so it's because actually, to our form and feelings and perception, all of these things are finer points that we have to work with until we can really get down to the most subtlest clinging of an I within these aggregates. So if we still have any kind of clinging to the aggregates, to form, to feeling, perception, all of that, then there is no truly seeing the emptiness in a person that we actually, this is something that we project onto the aggregates, on and in the aggregates. And therefore it's really important that these exterior phenomena, that these things are purified, or the lack of intrinsic existence, and those happens in order for us to really be able to have that realization of selflessness of a person. And so there's a relationship between that whole process of these two emptinesses, emptiness in phenomena and emptiness of the person. So when we go back to that quote from Nagarjuna, from the fundamental verses of the Middle Way, where it said, he is not the aggregates, he is not other than the aggregates. There is a reason that Nagarjuna started with the aggregates. And he then, through these lines, went down to say, who is or what is the Tathagata? Meaning, what is that actual person within the aggregates? And so there's a reason that he did put that first. And again, we think about our attachments and our aversions, our pleasures and displeasures, all come about based on experiences that we have through the basis of this fixation to our aggregates. And so all of this comes about through the aggregates. So they are coarser than the actual refinement of a realization of the lack of a self, of a person. Did that help, Larry?
Yes, that's very good.
당무마 삼당고들 풍부 된진 마가 빠도 가자가 다음에 참았지만 지진 가자가 다음에 참아 또 미투 말했어야 되나 유전 뺨 첨부하래 다띵 우마 탕규룰라 가자가 다음에 참아 또 봐라 풍부 된진 또 풍부 된진 까방은도 누구로 풍부 되면 또 방은도 누구래 수야를 빼 규정이야 다들 내 첨부래.
And so there's really a lot of good reason into why we must first have a realization of the more coarser, the fixation in a coarser manner to get to ridding ourselves of the finer fixation to the person. And so even within the Prasangika Madhyamaka, they do make the distinction of when it comes to realizing selflessness of the person, that there is a finer point to come to, that there is first the coarse fixation of a person that needs to be eliminated, and the finer, the finer fixation that needs to be eliminated. And so there's a reason. So there's a lot of reason behind this. It just makes good sense that we need to rid ourselves of the coarser fixation to aggregates before we can really rid ourselves of the finer fixation to the person. Ani shaya chikla, ani chiwa chikla, yanayandi uma taljorwe lukdela, yanayang di churgi dakme dang gangzaki dakme gi kebar yewa ani dogi yoma mares ani sumpe.
개발이요래. 가지고니 개발이 요 말했대. 다지고니 개발이요래.
Okay. Olaso. So I wanted to clarify something that before, that distinction where Geshe-la had mentioned that there was no distinction between the phenomena and the realization of selflessness of phenomena in person. So I was clarifying what, how that stands here. And what he was saying is the object being negated is the same, but they're not saying the process is the same. When you realize one, you don't realize the other. So correction there. It is the object that's being negated only that is the same. Selflessness, any intrinsic nature.
가지고니 개발하면 되니나요? 아니 가자가 다음에 참고 딱 참고 찜에 찌진 또 봐라. 죽이 다음에 참고 문도 로고야 돼. 다 기자마부도 안 가서 풍부를 되네. 렌진데 가서 꼼바 슝슝보여 때 막아봐도 가자가 다음에 참고 또 두고 맞다 인규들이. 풍부 렌진 캐 고야 돼. 풍부 렌진 달라 이 풍부도 빼 수두도 두면서 양양도 섬당하다 빼내 전부야 다 때래. 누가 가서 잘라서리질라 견셔리나 샘랍때 좀 강한 용음도 아니 풍부가나 견셔리나 직 샘랍 강한 제 용도.
So although it is true that what is said, that the object of negation is the same, but there are different bases upon which this object of negation is then analyzed and worked through and purified. They are, Geshe-la said, it just makes so much sense the way they explain that between realizing selflessness, the same object of negation, selflessness, or intrinsic existence within, that's what's being negated. We can see that easier in outer phenomena than we can in our own physical and psychophysical structure, because we have so reified this, and we're so established and habituated to think of an I within this psychophysical structure that it's so embedded, so habituated, that is very, very hard to eradicate this very subtle even this subtlest, it's so fine, this clinging, and so embedded. And there's no need to say that if we think about how our notion of a fixed reality of things causes us all kinds of trouble, no reason to go into why such a strong feeling of solidified that's me and these aggregates as having existence would cause us all kinds of difficulties. So that's why the Prasangika Madhyamakas, makes a lot of sense the way they explain going from the coarser and eradicating any fixation to the coarser, and then that it makes sense we have to eradicate the coarse before we can get to the fine.
Yeah.
Quick question, Diane. The fine, when you talk about that, like the fine grasping, is that to like the clarity of the mind? Is that like sawa? What can Geshe-la talk about that more subtle fixation?
Mm-hmm. Di charak hi kebar ani yerpadela ani dene rakba di sirputo di tramo ani trama trarak di tramo di ani kandrere dene and di. So can you ask me your question again?
You talked about the coarse fixation and the subtle fixation. So maybe he could just talk a little bit about what's the object.
Di zimpa di tramo gi zimpa di corla sumroche.
Diri kansaga dame rapa de tawa karta chagi ji nani dame bajiorwa. Dida rakbare. Ta kansa khono ranji me batao bala kansa ranji me batao to bala yani pe ranji me ba dembar matu batao bate kansa ka dame thamrowa. Ti chima ji to bala chuki dame to bangun lugu ware ta teri. Tawa karta ki chagi ji nani dame to bala ranji me pe di to bangun lugu wa mare. Kansa ka dame la thara ni chage ji nane dame chi dang yani ranji me ba kansa ranji me ba to ya da kansa ranji me ba to ba kansa ka dame thamudrwa
de corla songroche di triwadire.
kansa ranji me ba to ba la ta kazane ngazu share de diri da pe yulngweni ngazu nangse de ko garana kansa da mari chui kariji na yulngweni me ba de to ura lembar me ba tate kansa khona be lembar me ba to ba chima chi to ba la tape funso lembar me ba to bangun du re se adela be gyujen chembo re la gore ta indu kansa ranji me ba to ba tel karza jambaji ta yo marde kansa ranji me ba to ranji me ba kek bala funso ranji me ba kek guare
Punsum.
Pumpo lo soba ranji me ba kek bangun du guare.
So I'm not sure if I got to the finer point of your question, but when we talk about like how it's refined or a finer point.
Dain dilata.
La.
Kansa dame la rakpachi da tamuchi ni res. Chagya ji nangi dame rakpare es. Tito bala pumpo dembar me ba to ugu amares.
Pumpo
dembar me ba.
Dembar me ba.
Oh. Kansa ka dame tamu kansa kono ranshingi madu ba to bala. Pumpo dembar me ba to ugu ares. Mundu ugu ares.
So we have both the coarse clinging to like a self within the individual and the finer clinging to the self within the individual. And so when we talk about the different differentiations, the finer thing, like the most subtle thing to realize is so I guess the finer thing to realize, the finest and finite, maybe even, or the most important, like the last thing to realize is the more subtle clinging that we have to the self of a person, to ourselves, to the self of a person. And so in order to realize that, so like there are different levels to realize. In order to realize that most finest level and subtle level, we must first have a direct realization of the lack of intrinsic nature of the aggregates. So until the last one won't go away, until like that fixation to that person won't go away until we have a realization of an emptiness in the aggregates, the lack of any intrinsic existence in the aggregates. And that's what the subtlest point is. The subtlest point is after we realize the emptiness of the aggregate, this psychophysical aggregate, it's then that the finest, the most subtle clinging that earlier Geshe-la has said has just been part of our very intrinsic nature and habit that we just walk around with all the time. Then that can be eliminated. That's the finest point to eliminate. But I'm not sure if that answered your question. Because I think you were speaking about clarity.
가제 가사가 다음에 참모당 자기 지인한게 다음에 일에 개버지 두나다 개버지요. 되니 하고 그래.
근데 자기지.
자기 지는 니제 탐자 믿어봐. 추탐자 다음에 봐. 냐 냥하는데 봐. 지와 오시긴 시그때 자기 지도 들어와. तीन दामेता दामे रापारे किची सुंदंगी दाचिरे किची सुंदंगी दातु मटुबा तो यों तो गला दामे रापा तो पारे ते इनी राजिम कांसा राजिम में बखे घूमिंदो कांसा राजिम में बखे बाला फुंबो राजिम में बख माखे पर तो कांसा राजिम में बखे धुमारे सुनसुमरे.
And so when we think about these four seals. So I don't know if you're familiar with the four seals that all compounded phenomena are impermanent. The Chakyaji, and so when you really get to the point of the four seals, then what the four seals really are speaking about are this fourth, or this subtle, like this subtle selflessness, this subtle clinging to self. That it speaks to that point, or the subtle selflessness. So that's what.
가제 티켜버다 하고나 되니 켜버자 그래.
Ani gonda Geshe-la ngala ani pelcher ngala ani serpo machong ani ngala serpo mena kong la yang ani seroma sero yongere.
대달에 간제
pelcher di triwa nga yapong shine.
알레 자게 지난게 다메다 간사가 다음에 타분 일에 개버려요레스.
Okay, by Yore.
오, 개버려요레. 자기가
Okay.
지는 그 다음에 다음에 락바를 차디어와.
Oh, lasso. Okay, yeah.
저전 다음에 락바때다 다음에 락바 또 발라. 분소 란지메바 또 오가 말해. 간사가 다음에 타무 또 발라 분소 란지메바 또 먹는 누구래.
Oh, lasso.
이 개버려요레.
Okay, so I think I figured out kind of where I was hitched up on this. Within the four seals, this is actually not the same as the selflessness that you are speaking of. In order to realize the selflessness that's spoken about in the four seals, you would not have had to realize the selflessness of phenomena, or this is not the finer or more subtle selflessness, and therefore you would not have had to realize the selflessness of the aggregates, because this is coarse selflessness. When you're talking about the subtle selflessness, or fine, sometimes I translate that as finer, it's finer. You would first have had to realize the lack of intrinsic existence of the aggregates in order to realize subtle selflessness. So I think if we just call it coarse selflessness and subtle selflessness, the four seals is coarse selflessness. You would not have had to have had a realization of emptiness of the aggregates. In order to realize subtle selflessness, you would have had to have a realization of emptiness of the aggregates. Once you have a realization of emptiness of the aggregates, then that fine point, that subtlest, understanding or clinging to a self can be eradicated, but without first having emptiness, having a realization of emptiness of the aggregates, that finest clinging that's still there to a self cannot be eliminated.
Yeah, that should do was in so
Okay, so yeah, now maybe it's about 6 o'clock. So going back. So yeah, we were a little late. So if I didn't help to answer your question or get it right. Geshe-la said his knees aren't hurting, but he bets everyone else is ready for a stretched leg. So maybe we'll finish here. And yeah.
Yeah, then zamzarwa.
And yes, please, if we didn't answer, Geshe-la says, if he didn't answer any of those points, if any of those questions were not clearly answered, or you still want to ask more about them, please come back next week and we can discuss it more.
Yeah.
And so now we do our closing prayers.
Sancho semcho rimboche machi pana kengyurchi kyawa nyamba mepayam kone kondo pewar so kari rawe kurui chingamte pendam malin jumene chereze wan tenzin chak jabe side bardo kengyurchi jambal pawe chitra kemba tan kondo zampo team pingi jusu dalopchi pewandida tamche ratung kishun shebe kyawa tamche ke nga kana chodo bajen gewe zawan di kunja zampo chuchi ratung waraki.
Shall I read closing prayers?
Bodhisattva.
Yeah.
Okay. Bodhisattva, the excellent and precious mind, where it is unborn, may it arise. Where it is born, may it not decline, but ever increase higher and higher. In the land encircled by snow-white mountains, the source of all happiness and benefit flows in your person. Shinrezig, Tenzin, Gatso, remain until samsara ends. Just as the Bodhisattva Manjushri attained omniscience and Samantab Hadra 2. So now I dedicate these merits to train and follow in their footsteps, as all the victorious Buddhas of the past, present, and future praise dedication as supreme. So now I too dedicate these sources of my merit for all beings to perfect good actions.
Thank you, Geshe-la. Thank you, Diane.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Good to see everyone.